They say justice is blind, that she wears a cloth over her eyes so she can't see race, wealth, or power. They say her scales are balanced, that every human being, no matter how small, weighs the same before her. They say the sword she carries strikes without hesitation or bias. But if that were true, why does the blade always seem to fall in the same direction? Why do those born with crowns never seem to bleed, while those born with nothing carry the scars of every verdict? The world preaches equality under the law, yet walks daily in inequality made lawful. And so begins the story we don't want to tell ourselves, the one that reveals that perhaps justice isn't blind at all. Perhaps she just looks away. Picture a city at dawn. The streets are calm, washed in gold by the morning sun. Vendors open their stalls, the smell of tea drifts through the air, and the world pretends to be fair. In the heart of that city, two stories unfold in parallel. In a glass tower, a man in a suit arrives at court. He is accused of laundering billions, numbers so large they stop feeling real. He walks with quiet confidence, flanked by lawyers in finer suits, their briefcases heavy with legal tricks and precedent. They greet the guards by name, they smile. They know the system because they helped build it. A few miles away, a boy in torn shoes is led into another courtroom. His crime? Stealing a loaf of bread. His lawyer didn't show up. The judge sighs impatiently. The sentence is swift. 2 crimes, 2 courts, 2 worlds. And yet both are called justice. The city carries on. Nobody notices that the scales have already tipped long before the verdict. The man in the tower will pay a fine smaller than the price of his car. The boy will spend months behind bars, learning that poverty itself is a crime. This isn't an isolated story. It's the blueprint of civilization. The oldest story ever told, the law as theater, where power plays the lead and justice is just a supporting role. When the first societies began writing laws, the people holding the pen were never the poor, the enslaved, or the powerless. They were kings, priests, conquerors, those with something to protect. Law was not born to liberate, it was born to organize obedience. From Hammurabi's code to modern constitutions, the same ink runs through history. Law, written not for everyone but for those who could afford to be heard. We call it civilization. But sometimes it feels more like a cage made of paperwork. Empires have always disguised control as justice. Ancient Rome painted it in imperial colors. Tyrian purple, reserved only for the emperor, forbidden to all others. A law written to protect order, but really to remind everyone who ruled. In medieval Europe, kings claimed divine authority, using God's law to bless their own decrees. Today, governments wrap their power in democracy and corporate legality. They no longer call it divine, they call it due process. But the pattern doesn't change, only the vocabulary does. The law forbids stealing, but never questions how the land was first taken. It punishes the hungry, but rarely touches those who made them hungry in the first place. It condemns violence except when the powerful commit it in uniforms or in the name of national interest. We are taught that the law is neutral, a clean mirror reflecting morality, but a mirror can only reflect what stands before it, and when only power stands before the law, the reflection itself becomes distorted. History's greatest atrocities were all perfectly legal at the time slavery was legal. Colonial conquest was legal. Apartheid was legal. Even the Holocaust began with laws. Papers stamped and signed, regulations passed and followed. Evil, it seems, doesn't always wear chaos. Sometimes it wears a robe and holds a gavel. And yet the story continues, dressed in modern language, hidden in plain sight. Today, multinational corporations pollute rivers, poison air, destroy communities, and when caught, they pay a fine. $1 billion settlement proudly announced on the news, while the same company makes 10 times that profit the next quarter. For them, justice is just another line in the budget, the cost of doing business. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, a man who steals food to feed his family faces years in prison. His name will be forever stained. The corporation's name will appear in Forbes' list of most successful companies. The contrast is not accidental. It is the architecture of control, polished, professional, and protected by the illusion of fairness. Even in democracies where the law claims to be of the people, power still hides behind its own language. Legislation written in words no ordinary person can understand, courtrooms designed to intimidate, systems so complex that truth itself gets lost in the footnotes. And when you zoom out, when you step beyond nations, the illusion shatters completely. On the global stage, there is something called international law. It sounds noble, moral, and just. But it is built on voluntary obedience. There is no world police, no global judge, no true enforcement. The United Nations can condemn. The International Criminal Court can issue warrants, but without consent from the powerful. These words are weightless. The same countries that drafted the rules refuse to live by them. The same powers that speak of human rights drop bombs in their name. The same leaders who call for justice for others demand immunity for themselves. The law, it seems, has boundaries, not of geography, but of privilege. And so, we live in a world where justice is both everywhere and nowhere. A world where legality and morality have divorced, but still pretend to share the same house. But even in this bleakness, there is a strange kind of light, because hypocrisy by its nature is a confession. When power cloaks itself in justice, it admits, silently, that justice is the language people believe in. Every great movement in history began when people learned to speak that language back. When they said, "You wrote these laws, now live by them." Civil rights, women's suffrage, the fall of apartheid. Every one of them began as an act of defiance dressed in legality. Protesters didn't reject the idea of law. They demanded that the law live up to its own words, because even if the law was born from power, it carries within it the seeds of rebellion. Every constitution, every declaration, every courtroom promise, they can all be turned back against the hands that forged them. When people believe that fairness belongs to them, not just to the powerful, the illusion of justice begins to evolve into something real. The fight for the rule of law, then, isn't a matter of accepting its lies or rejecting it entirely. It's the art of using the lie against the liar, to hold the powerful to their own promises, to make them kneel before the ideals they crafted to control others. The law may have been written to maintain order, but order itself is not peace. Peace without fairness is just silence imposed by fear. Real justice begins when silence ends. So perhaps there is no true rule of law in this world. Not yet. Perhaps what we have is something more fragile, more human, an aspiration pretending to be reality.
And maybe that's not a failure. Maybe it's our only hope. Because as long as people believe that justice should exist, they'll keep demanding that it does. The rule of law is not a monument standing tall in marble courts, it's a flame carried in trembling hands through storms of corruption and deceit. It flickers, yes, but it never fully dies. The powerful may bend the rules, but they can never erase the idea that the rules exist. They can twist justice, but they can't stop the whisper that says, "This isn't fair." That whisper, passed from generation to generation, is stronger than any decree. Justice, in the end, isn't blind. She's wounded, scarred, perhaps even disillusioned. But she still walks among us, sometimes in protests, sometimes in petitions, sometimes in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to remind her what she was meant to be. Because the rule of law was never about perfection. It was about pursuit, a constant reaching towards something purer than our nature, more honest than our institutions, more human than our history. And maybe that's what keeps civilization alive, not our laws, but our longing to make them real. The idea that someday, somewhere, the scales might finally balance, that justice will not just be spoken, but lived. That power will not just write the rules, but follow them. Until then, the rule of law remains a dream, fragile, flickering, and unfinished, but a dream worth fighting for. Because even if justice is not yet real, the fight for it is the most human thing we have left.